Tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozoma St. John host the incredible new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars.
I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, tonight on NBC.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Recruiting Book Club. I'm Carmen Hudson, and I wrote a book about recruiting last year and discovered that there are many other recruiters who have put their thoughts to paper and are happy to share what they know about recruiting. I'm excited to share these conversations with you. I've talked with TA leaders and TA professionals who've written books about what's happening in our profession. So why don't you buckle up as we hear from the best in the business. So I'll just jump right in. I am so excited today to have Shally as part of my recruiting book podcast. He was one of the first people that I thought about. And I discovered something as part of this, and I'll admit to that in a little bit because I think it's important to know. But I want to first start with having you introduce yourself. And I want to hear just a little bit about your history because this is a show for recruiters. So I actually, part of what I want to do is encourage recruiters to write. The other part of what I want to do is encourage them to expand their careers. So I'd love to hear about your career journey and how you decided to do things the way that you decided to do, which is, I would encourage anyone to go and take a look at Shally's LinkedIn profile just to get a sense of all the work that he's done with all the organizations. But some of those projects were not long-term projects. Some were. So I'd love to hear about sort of how you decided to do what you want to do. And then we'll dive into your book. I've got a whole list of questions, but let's just turn this into a great discussion. So welcome.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to it for sure. Are we sure we have enough time?
You know what? I've already scheduled a part 2 in my mind.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I did have a plan, but I do plan things. And, even when my wife and I met, we planned getting married, we planned buying a house, we planned having kids, we planned. But of course, plans don't always work out.
Not
But
the way that we
we
want.
did. Yep. Not necessarily, but but you plan, right? Because what's that old saying? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So at least you plan and then you can fail, but at least you plan. So I did plan, but I did not plan being in recruiting. There's a story actually, I'm not sure if it's in the book. I thought there was a story in the book that talks about how I got into recruiting. But the long and short of it is I had been in the Peace Corps, had completed my service, so full tour duty, and completed my, closed out my service. Came back to the U.S. and was having a hard time finding a job. It was a really bad economic time, a bit of a recession. It was very challenging, even though when you finish your service, you get non-compete status for 2 years, which means you get to the front of the line on any job that is a government job. It still was, very challenging. So I traveled around the country, visited friends, and my last stop on the way back to going home with my tail between my legs and begging for money was Atlanta, where my friend Mark from college was living, had moved to. So I visited him for a week, and money ran out. It was literally the Friday before I was supposed to head home and beg for an allowance. That as a grown man here in my 20s. Mark is like, man, yeah, you're taking off tomorrow. It's our last hurrah. Let's go shoot some pool at this place that I know. And interesting side note, when I was in the Peace Corps, no electricity, no running water, not a whole lot of forms of entertainment that were healthy and allowed, So there was this one little guy who had a pool table and a generator and ran the generator for a couple hours and was able to chill beer enough to have a few beers. And so I basically played pool almost every night. And the table was awful. I mean, it was like full of potholes and the bumpers were nicked and everything. So I got pretty good at like placing the ball. because that's pretty much all you could do. You couldn't really aim accurately with all the potholes. So I got pretty good at that, and Mark was pretty good at aiming. So between the two of us, we did a really good job of basically mopping the floor with everybody there. And to the last couple, who was a British couple that ran a staffing agency branch here in Atlanta. And we just started bantering back and forth. You know how British people like to rib or take the piss out, that whole British thing. And so, we're dishing it right back, and we're having so much fun. We're just kind of dragging the game along. And along the way, they tell me a little bit about this thing that they do. He ran the branch and she was the operations person. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Wait, time out. So here I am traveling the country, unemployed and basically unemployable. And you're telling me that you get paid to help people find jobs. And I'm like, that's a scam. I want in. Like, get me in. And he goes, well, you seem like a pretty decently well-spoken, bilingual, guy with a college degree. And yeah, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you come by the office on Monday and we'll talk about it. And I'm like, all right, fine. So we finished our tournament, crushed them, of course. And I wasn't going to leave. So I didn't leave. I stayed until Monday, wore my suit to the office. And basically, as they said, you can start today if you want.
That's amazing. So
This was
your
full desk.
whole career was
Started with a
balanced just
pool tournament.
on a random pool game.
Random pool tournament. Never even knew sourcing and recruiting
Wow.
existed. I had no idea staffing firms
I don't
existed.
think I knew that story.
Yeah, I had no idea that this industry even existed, And one of my mentors back then, African American woman from Chicago, who had grown up in this industry. And I mean, by grown up, I mean like she had 35 years of experience by the time I started it. This was in 1996. She grew up in what they call data processing. So her experience was placing like people with punch cards at
That's what it was,
IBM.
right.
Like that's what she used to do. And so she taught me as much as she could, and I from there just kind of picked up on what I needed to do to survive, because I was getting my butt whooped by everybody else that had the magic Rolodexes. You know how it is. So I just started thinking of ways creatively to do it. But that's how I got into recruiting, and that was a staffing firm, and it was contingency. No salary, just 100% contingency.
Love that. Yep.
And it just went from there.
That's
So
where you determine, you know what, I'm going to do this for a living or I'm not.
I wasn't sure yet.
Yeah.
I thought, maybe this is it, maybe it isn't. I eventually had left that company because I met someone that was a really good mentor, Harriet McCormick, who had retired and was taken out of retirement by one of her proteges, who started a company and brought her in to be the VP of talent. And she and I met at an event, and she saw something in me that she thought, he's going places. So she took me under her wing and brought me into her company, which is now, I had left staffing and now was basically doing it for inside of a corporation, and it was consulting. So now I was placing people, but I was placing people who ended up working for us.
Right.
And then they were on billable hours. So
Billable
still
hours,
very
right.
similar.
Yeah.
Except for instead of me placing them to go work somewhere else, I was hiring them to come work for us. And then I was getting like a margin and, so tons of money there too. And she just showed me a lot of different ways that this industry could take you. And then that's when I created my plan. And I said, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and have my own company. And, it just sort of planned from there.
That's awesome. At what point did you know that you had acquired enough knowledge to be an expert in the field?
Let's see. Let me look at my calendar.
No, you know what I mean. Like
Wednesday of last week?
No. That's much earlier in your career. I can attest to it. At what point did you realize, like,
yeah, that's a good question.
I know some things.
That's when I spun out of corporate. So Harriet passed away, sadly, and left a huge gap in my heart and in my professional development, because she had really taken this rough and tumble, kid right out of the Peace Corps with maybe 2 years of experience before that, and put some spit and polish on me, and military academy style, put me out there. And so when she left, I was left with the CEO of the company because I had started the first branch of the organization. They were based in Atlanta, and it was the first time that they were going to expand, and they wanted to expand to Phoenix because there's a lot of opportunity there. So I went out and I did that, go West, young man. And after about a year and a half, the company was just going in a different direction, and they were demanding that I increase my margins and that I double back on my clients and some things that I didn't really agree with. So at that point, I said, I'm just going to go out on my own. People are really interested in what I'm doing. They're asking me to train them. They're asking me to teach them. Obviously, I know something that people want to learn. I could probably make a business out of it. I always wanted to have my own business ever since I was in college and I learned about entrepreneurship. My grandfather had a business, so it just kind of runs in the family. So that's when I spun out and I took on a couple of clients. And when I went to, this is the answer to your question. When I went on site, one of them was a company called Interact Commerce Corporation. You might know them as ACT. And ACT also later on became Peachtree Software. They got bought by Sage. So they're now part of Sage. But anyway, when they were Interact Commerce Corporation, the makers of ACT, based in Phoenix, and they brought me in to help them with their sourcing and recruiting. It still wasn't really called sourcing then. I realized that I knew a lot of things that their team didn't know. And I think that's the moment when I said, this has value, this has worth, I can package this and sell it. And that's when I created Job Machine, actually, ironically, right?
No way.
And started my cyber sleuthing newsletter that let lots of people subscribe to. You were an early subscriber. And I think eventually that led to 1999 or 1998 when you and I met.
I
Something
think
like that.
so. I think probably, was I at Amazon already, or no, I don't think I was. So
Microsoft. You recruited me into Microsoft.
I recruited you to Microsoft, but I knew you
Yeah.
before then, or I knew
Yeah,
I knew
right.
of you. Yeah.
It was probably Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you hadn't gone right. You contacted me when you went to Microsoft. Right. But that was the beginning of just me realizing that people subscribed to the newsletter and they called me and I was like, okay, people are reading this. I think that's about the time. So
The whole newsletter phase was amazing. Because for me, I didn't focus on recruiters. I sent a newsletter to every single person I might have interviewed or may have wanted to interview for
all
any
your
position.
contacts.
And
right?
so it was just about, here are a few things that are happening in the industry. Here are a few roles that I have open. And here's a few funny things that have happened to me. And people would read it
People
and
read
they'd
it.
respond
Yep.
to it. And if I needed to call someone up and ask them about a job that I had open, or if they had any friends, they were open to it because they
They
felt
were
like
primed.
they got to know me once a month. So
Yep. They
it's
were
amazing.
primed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that led to now, and I would I really do encourage you to go out and take a look at Shally's resume and how you have built your career and developed your skill set. And, maybe we'll one day have a deeper conversation on the different roles. But I'd love to hear, you found yourself in the world of consulting and advising. So I want to know, you're at Riviera Advisors.
Yep.
And Riviera is a company that's been around for a long time.
It's a top tier. It's a
Top
tier one
and
management
it's led by
consulting
Jeremy Eskenazi, who
Yeah.
was one of the people who hired me at Amazon. So he's sort of my entree into the West Coast. Well, a little bit later. I had one job before that in the West Coast, but I just adore Jeremy. So when you went there, I had no idea that that's what you were going to do, and so I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you went there, what you're doing there, what you're building.
Yeah, funny story. So, I tried my hand. I always knew, my mom knew and my wife knew before I did. But then after they knew, then I knew that I was just not cut out to be an employee, Carmen, just like you.
Yeah.
We are just not cut out to be employees. Some people just, it just isn't.
Well,
We can do it.
I can
We
do
can
it.
do it. But
And even love it. But
Right.
eventually my head's gonna come up. I'm gonna look around.
Exactly.
Something's gonna capture my attention, and I'm gonna
And
wanna go deep there. So,
exactly. And
yeah.
so, we just really don't have that in us. And for me, it's I have this disease that fortunately isn't very contagious, which is called altruism, that drives me to share what I have with
Yep.
people for better or worse, and teach. And so I always had that, and I always had this entrepreneurial spirit. So when I um joined corporate America because of Obamacare and the way things were going with healthcare, I was basically uninsurable.
Mhm.
My medical insurance premiums as a solopreneur went from about $300 a month to about
Right.
$3,000 a month,
Right.
literally overnight.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my goody goo goo, I gotta do something about it." And that's when I started looking for a corporate job.
Mhm.
Until then, I was a consultant,
Mhm. Right.
and that was the plan. It was, I used to make money teaching, I used to make money, speaking, but it just I had to get a square job because I couldn't afford the health insurance, and I we're starting to have kids, have a family, and all that. So I joined a fintech company called Fiserv.
Mhm.
Really great experience, and I was there for a long time. And eventually, they acquired First Data,
Mhm.
which was a huge merger. Um, Created a lot of ripples. People started leaving left and right. I was one of the last few still there when I just made it. COVID hit, right,
Right. Right.
2019.
Right.
So at this point, I had been a solopreneur for a long time. My wife and I had a company that we sold, successfully exited. We started another company. We sold that one. The first one went out of business. Job Machine actually went out of business because of 9/11. We were,
Oh, wow.
it was a
You're right.
training company,
That was the
and nobody
timing.
was buying training at that point because nobody was traveling anywhere. So
Right.
we crashed and burned. But we started up, sold it, started another one, sold it, and at this point, it was like, all right, we need the benefits. Then COVID hit, and I was still there. I mean, I managed to stay there for about a year during COVID. I was lucky enough to have enough value. That was a big pivot in my career, to be
Mhm.
honest. I no longer was just recruiting. And I'm not being trying to be dismissive of recruiting, but recruiting was my career. I worked with all these companies, you name it. I mean, so many organizations, a huge list of clients, but it was all recruiting. I never really got into any other parts of the business. And at Fiserv, I was able to transition into analytics
Mhm.
and workforce planning and um, strategy at another level, speaking at the board level
Right.
about talent strategy. And that really interested me. So that's how I kinda got the bug of, you know, training and recruiting and teaching recruiting and talking about recruiting. That's been fun, but I gotta try something else, and that's when I reached to join a consulting firm. One of my customers from before I joined Fiserv basically invited me to join as a partner in a management consulting firm. That was my first taste in management consulting. They were acquired, and, you know, so I was only there for about a little bit more than a year. The plan was that I was gonna stay there and retire because I wanted to be a consultant.
Right.
That was my plan. But the company got acquired, and the principal, the founder, basically essentially retired. So a few of us were kinda like, "Well, now what do we do now?" So I ended up taking a corporate job again, primarily, again, benefits, right? And I really liked that. I was global head of talent sourcing for a unicorn. It was actually people analytics and talent sourcing. So now that I had learned this other side that was workforce planning and people analytics, and it had to do with strategy beyond attracting talent,
Right.
I put that to work. And I did that for a couple of years until that company also lost about 70% of their fair market value, which was a big, a big letdown. And again, I had planned to stay there longer, but when your company loses 70% of its market value and you have two jobs and only one of those is really relevant now,
Right.
you're overpaid,
Yeah.
right? I mean, at that point, I was just not,
You know the
yeah,
target's gonna hit you soon. Right.
yeah, I wasn't, they weren't getting what they were paying for at that point because I only had half a job. I had started with 2 jobs and I only had 1 job. So that for me, that's a half a job. So that's when I, made the jump and did a little bit of freelancing for a little bit from when I left there. So this was about January 2024, I think it was. And I called Jeremy up. I think it might have been March,
Right.
February or March or something like that. And this is how the conversation started. I said, Jeremy and I go way back, like you. We've crossed paths. I call him on his birthday, stuff like that. So we're buds, but I never really worked with him.
Right.
So I just called him up and I straight up said, Jeremy, when I grow up, I want to be like you. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, one day I hope part of my plan with, going into consulting when I left Fiserv and went into the consulting firm and then rounded out my experience as being a global head of talent. I said, someday I want to be able to aspire to be part of a management consulting firm like yours. And he said, "You can already do that." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You already have the experience, why don't we talk about it? Let's explore."
Right.
And we spent a couple of months courting each other, exploring the possibilities and comparing notes. And we realized that it was a really good match because all the things that I had learned from sourcing and recruiting and workforce analytics and all this other stuff was really good complement to what they are already doing
Right.
with very little overlap. So it was almost like they had a gap that they never really intended to fill,
Right.
but it was this gap. They usually just would refer people. If somebody came to them and said, "We want sourcing," they would send them to somebody else. They would send them to me or whatever. So it was a really good opportunity to bring the two together. And we just decided to basically merge the paths. So I ended
Gotcha.
up joining as a principal consultant.
So how have you typically helped clients? They call and they say they want what?
So most of the clients are my own, and the advantage of flying under the Riviera banner is, as you can imagine, brand name recognition and credibility for me as a management consultant. I don't think I quite had that yet on my own. So as a solopreneur, I probably didn't. I wasn't global head of HR or chief people officer or anything like that. So I wasn't quite there yet. So it gave me that, but also there's a lot of for folks that don't know too much about running your own business. There's a lot of things that keep you up as a founder and a CEO that you don't talk about. Like, for example, meeting payroll. A good leader will sacrifice their own income in exchange for making sure that their people are taken care of. And so there were times as a business owner that I didn't get a paycheck because I wanted my people to get the paycheck. Things like that. Things like receivables,
Mhm.
having outstanding receivables that are more than 120, 180 days old. And, you already did the work, you already paid your people, but your client
Right.
hasn't paid you.
Right.
So
Right.
there's
Right.
all these things that drive you crazy that have nothing to do with your expertise.
Right.
And being part of a organization like Riviera gives me that cover because there's all this infrastructure. They have billing, they have accounting, they have insurance that I can't really afford as a solo
Right.
practitioner.
Right.
Cyber insurance, fiduciary insurance. So there's a lot of this. So being part of a team of equals where all of us are, management consultants and we can pool our resources is like sharing the weight.
Right.
And
And
that
you
is
can
helpful.
share clients and you can
Right.
learn from each other. It is, having had that experience in recruiting toolbox, it's invaluable. It's
It's
just
invaluable. It's a team.
right.
You're part of a team. You can
You're part of a
you can
team,
take a day
yet you
off
get
because somebody
to
can cover for you.
that's it.
You can,
That's it.
you can cover. So that was so most of the customers are people that already know me, and I'm now able to do bigger projects because I have the insurance that I didn't have before. And some of them are people that are going to Riviera for other projects that, now they're able to say, well, we also have sourcing, which they
Right.
wouldn't say before. So, it's a little bit of both. But basically what they come to me and to Rivera for is they have a problem with their internal talent acquisition team's performance.
Mhm.
It's either underperforming or it's just going in the wrong direction or it's performing, but they're being asked to do more with less.
Right.
So, it's not always because they're failing. Sometimes it's because they want to prepare for what's coming
Right.
and they know they need to kind of, put more high octane fuel in the tank. So they come to us for that. It's mostly, I would say, strategic advice, majority of it,
Right.
with some training,
Right.
but the training really is not the most important component, because when a company comes to you and says, I want to train all my recruiters, you know this, if they're not prepared to actually make the changes that they need to make, the training can't be implemented.
That's it. And one of the rules that we had, and one of the rules that I have is, I don't do much training any longer. It's really sitting down with recruiting leadership and helping them understand what challenges are they facing
Yep,
and
exactly.
why is this training necessary. And it could be, what in the case of recruiting toolbox, it wasn't always just the recruiters. It was also the
Yep.
hiring managers
Hiring managers
the
and
folks who were
yep.
interviewing who were part of this training that was necessary. And you have to really get them to think through and unpack all the things that are happening in their organization
It's a
before
true diagnostic. It's a
it
true
really is.
root cause analysis that leads to some recommendations that you implement. And sometimes there's skills that need to be imparted. But when they come to you and say, "Hey, I want you to come in and do a 3-day workshop," and it's just out of the blue,
Ah,
chances are they're going to learn a lot of stuff and then not be able to use it
right,
because they don't have
right.
room in their day. They're already busy. They're already overwhelmed.
Exactly. So we're just adding to the plate if
Yeah,
we
here's
just
more
start
stuff
throwing
to do.
training
Yeah, here you go. Here's
and,
another
and we don't
6
change the
hours.
way that we're actually working or
Right.
working on behalf of the organization.
So it's listening, learning, diagnosing, and then making recommendations and
Yep.
creating a way forward with recommendations that are honestly it's different every time. There's no cookie cutter.
There really isn't, because every organization is different, every team is different, every level of performance where, you have a group that may have been performing well and suddenly they're not. There are a lot of reasons for that. And so, or you have a group that's performing well and they want something more. The degree of difference that they have to perform at
The
is
combination of assets that they have, sometimes they have things that they're not.
1000%.
So they're
1000%.
really a big part of it is just learning how they're doing things and figuring out where you can tweak things and knowing where your tweaks will make a difference.
Right.
That's a big part of it. And
Right.
I think I understand why people hesitate to hire a management consulting firm that is young and doesn't have a lot of experience, because you haven't seen all the mistakes.
Right.
You haven't lived with the mistakes.
No.
Everybody on our team has. So, we're able to predict what can happen if we give the wrong advice. That's part of it.
That's it. That's it. So I want to dive into your book, but I also want to I hope we have enough time to tackle a white paper that you recently wrote. And I want to make an admission before we even dive into the book. And that is that we're going to interview you today on the Sourcing and Recruitment Handbook. And I didn't realize that you had another book that was
Oh,
available, which I just
right.
ordered.
Third
Be
book.
here next Thursday.
Yep.
So we'll have to come back at least to talk about that. But that one's more focused on sourcing. This one is the Sourcing and Recruitment Handbook. And so
Yep.
you can tell I went through very thoroughly. I read it years and years ago. But I went back and just sort of dived a little bit more deeply. So I've got some specific questions for you about overall the process,
Mhm.
that piece of it. I want to talk about the white paper that you most recently wrote as well.
Okay.
So we'll get through some of that. I don't know if we'll get through all of that, but I've got a bunch of stuff. So I would love to really understand what prompted you to write a book, because I remember when this came out, there were not very many books
There
about
weren't.
TA.
Actually, there weren't any.
It was. I remember
There weren't.
when I was at Capital One, and I actually created an actual library of resources for recruiters, some of which had to do with recruiting. And, we had Jerry's books that were available, and Jerry and Mark Mailer,
Mhm.
their books, but there weren't a
Career
whole lot of them.
crossroads.
And so
Yep.
one of the things I was most proud of leaving, I was there for 6 months. I left them a nice full library of
Library.
reading references.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write a book? Um, how easy was it for you? And what will you say to someone who is thinking about writing a book currently?
All right, so that was the second book. The first book was written much, much, much longer before that, and it
Yep.
was actually I believe it was the first recruiting related book that was a book, not a guide of list of websites. Barbara Ling
Yes.
had one,
And I
and
know
Career
I have a
Crossroads
copy.
had
I
one.
just couldn't find it.
I still have the first and second edition of it. But the difference between that one was really a desktop reference.
Yes.
It was the kind of thing that you flip through in dog ear, and it was almost like you had a table of, like an index of, like, if you want to do this, go here. So not a book you would read cover to cover. And I wanted to do that. So what drove me to this one is I wanted to write more of a book
Hmm.
that actually had like flow. And this one came out. This was published through Peter Weddle. He's no longer publishing for our industry, but it ended up being more of a textbook.
Right.
And you can read it cover to cover, but it is much more of a textbook that almost could even be used in a college course. It actually it had chapters and all that. The third one was a much more business book where you could literally pick it up cover to cover. I know you just ordered it, but you could read it through, and there's a story, and there's
Gotcha.
you can actually pick it up, put it down, and go do it.
When did you write that one?
That one was written in when it was written, it was published are two different things, and there's a long story for that, which actually leads me to one of the answers to your question about. So I think it was published in 2019,
Okay.
but it was written. Yeah, it was published in 2019. It was written in 2017, and it just took a while to actually go through the entire editorial process.
Yes.
It was pretty lengthy, and so one of the I'll tell you the lesson that I learned was don't edit your own book. Hire a professional editor
Yes.
and fire them, and then hire another one.
Hire another one. Get
Yep,
your friends to read it. Do all
because
of that.
I mean the first editor said that they were really thorough, and after we got the proof, there were still errors.
Yeah.
They were missing figures, tables, so we sent it to another one. Ultimately, I ended up sending it to someone who is an attorney by trade, but has turned to basically going through manuscripts with a fine-tooth comb.
Right.
And so they're like someone who writes a contract,
Right.
And even they still had when I published it the second time, there's still 37 mistakes in it.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Got a quick question for you. Is your job easy, stress-free, and full of rainbows and sunshine every single day? Yeah, I'd say that's a big fat no. Hi, I'm David Noe, host of Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners, and proud to be part of the Work-Defined community. Take a step down into my Speakeasy live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we tackle HR and business challenges through raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations. This is HR like you've never heard it before. Bold, real, and full of practical takeaways. Real guests, bold insights, authentic conversations that drive change. Catch every episode on demand through your favorite podcast platform or all the content at speakeasyhr.com.
You won't find everything. I
And
found
it's
it so
just
useful to have both external eye,
Mhm.
someone who had no experience in
Non-industry.
recruiting,
Yeah.
and then some folks within the industry to read through and send me back questions. And so it was very different editing that each group did, but very useful.
Yeah, I went through
Yeah.
three editing cycles and a couple of proofs and everything. So yeah, so ultimately it's 2019 is the January or February 2019 is the actual publication date of the second edition. The first edition only had 100 prints because the first printing was just so full of errors that we didn't really sell those.
Gotcha.
I gave them away and and then sent it to the second one. So, but yeah, so the best advice I can give you, creating a book, writing a book is really a compulsion.
Hmm.
If you want to write a book because you feel like it's going to generate sales, it may or may not. You can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
If you want to write a book because you want to get famous, it may or may not. You can't guarantee it. The only real reason to write a book is because you have no choice.
For me, I just had all of these notes and I did not want to blog about them. I wanted it to
Yeah.
have more of a permanent home. And so I put it all down in the
You
book.
felt compelled. You
I
had to
felt
put it
compelled to
into
do it.
yeah,
You know,
that's it. So if
at
you
least
don't have
more
that
compelled
compulsion,
than working on my novel, which is the true book. But, that's a 20-25 year ongoing process.
right, right. That's right.
Yeah,
What's it called? There's a the masterpiece of your life. What's that called?
exactly.
There's a word for that.
Yeah,
But yeah, so when, I was the first, it was myself, Steve Levy, and one of the Microsoft recruiters were the three first bloggers that started blogging about recruiting.
right.
The very, very first. So I went from a newsletter to a blog, then the first book, then the second book, then the third book. And when I wrote the third book, I finally rested. I finally felt like I wrote an actual book.
That's one of my questions. Like, are you planning to write another one?
Nope.
No?
No, I was one of the first bloggers. So look at the list of achievements, right?
Yeah,
And this was, I set out to do this. So I wanted to be one of the first in a lot of areas. If not I was definitely the first person to blog about sourcing,
right.
but I was one of three first bloggers. I was the first person to create a book, a published book about recruiting, not a guide with hyperlinks, but a book. And then again about sourcing. So that's two firsts. I was the first person to actually teach a college level course on sourcing for credit in
Right.
a legitimate MBA program.
That's awesome.
And so I had all these achievements that I checked the boxes, and I'm like, all right, that I'm done. I don't need to do this
You have
anymore.
shared as much of your accomplishments and your thoughts about this topic than
Yeah.
you want to
That's why I
share.
don't really blog as much anymore. And
Yeah.
now I save my time to solve the problems that clients come to me with. Honestly, it's just so much work to write a book.
It is
A
hard work.
real book, okay, not a
Yeah.
pamphlet. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff out there
No.
that are 50-page pamphlets.
I had ideas and I had chapter, you know, outlines either written down or in my mind. And so that helped. But for me, it took about 6 months to write it, a couple months to edit it, couple more months. So it took a good year. And
Mhm.
it's time consuming. And then you publish it and you just think, oh gosh, I did it all wrong. Right. So
Yeah, right. And so that's why I did it a second time and a third time. And I wanna be direct when I say a real book, not a pamphlet. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but if you have no ISDN number, it's not a published book.
yes.
You can self-publish a book, but without
Yes.
an ISDN number, it doesn't go into a library.
Yes.
It doesn't go into a bookstore.
That's it.
So that's what I'm talking about, right? You can create a book that you self-publish on demand and people buy, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
No.
talking about something that's,
That has a little bit more
yeah, it's
substantiation
a
behind it.
it
Yep.
yeah, it's substantial.
So
And it's just too much work.
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's very it has become for me at least. I am very happy that I did it. And I even had I self-published. I just published on the
Yeah,
Amazon
I did
Kindle
too with
platform.
BookBaby. Yeah,
And
but with an ISDN number,
yeah,
still published. Yeah.
right, exactly. But and then I had a publisher come to me and say, I want to work with you and let's create a book about X, Y, and Z. And in the end, I decided not to work with them. There were too many issues around doing that
Yeah.
that didn't make sense. And so, maybe I'll come back to it. But I want to spend a little bit of time diving into the contents of the Sourcing and Recruitment Handbook, um, because I think for anyone who is new to this, anyone who doesn't have a deep level of skill, or someone who is just looking for inspiration about how they're going to run their teams, this is 100% useful. So I would love to just start. And when it comes to sourcing, I think page 67, there's a chart there, and you recommend starting your sourcing projects by finding 250 candidates. And that just struck me. And then you
Leads.
said,
Yeah.
then outreach 50 at a
Yep.
time. Is that still your advice? Do you think that's the way that things are just, does this process still work in that same way?
It does. It's changed a little bit in that it's first of all, it's easier to find volume leads, but it's also easier to find garbage.
Yeah.
That is useless. Um, in the 30 years that I've been doing this, I've always been very meticulous about tracking stuff. Partly because I have OCD, but also partly because I like to do a lot of A/B testing and compare things. So, you know, people have come to me and asked me to write white papers for them because I do this A/B testing already. It's just part of my natural process, and so I have the data. And the data that I analyzed demonstrates that on average, across every industry, every rank that I've ever worked, every rank that anybody that I've managed has ever worked, it comes down to 147 leads to hire.
Gotcha.
147 leads produce a hire.
So that number just is always, doesn't matter the position, doesn't matter the company.
Sometimes the average is a little bit higher in some industries, and some you probably know this as well as I do. At Microsoft, we had some roles where it took 350 leads
Right.
to make a hire, and in some cases, you can find 50 leads. But the thing is, on average, if you take them all and sum them all up and divide them up, 147 means that if you found 147 people and a good portion of them, 70% of them respond, and at least half of those end up being interested in having a conversation, and at least half of those are qualified, and at least half of those get submitted, and at least half of those get interviewed, you have a hire.
You will have a hire. And by thinking about this population of 147, that includes folks that you found, folks that have applied. It's a combination of
No, that is folks that you found.
That's folks
That
that
does
you
not
found.
include folks that applied. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Applicants, I never measured applicants because it is really difficult. So you can't A/B test applicant flows accurately because you don't really have there's really no good way to determine where people are coming from.
Right.
Even the most sophisticated ATSs can only tell you what the last point of entry was. And I used to use this example. I don't anymore because people I don't think really appreciate it as much as they did before. But I use the example of if you buy a BMW, Google claims that they sold it to you.
Right.
Why do they do that? Because they say that when you went to Google and Googled Google BMW 560i, I'm not even sure if that's the right name. I don't have a BMW, but I have a Kia Telluride. So let's switch the analogy. So, Google says that because I went online and I Googled Kia Telluride and it found the dealership and I went to the dealership and bought the car, Google claims they sold me the car.
That's it, right?
But the reality is that was the last point of entry. That's how I found the dealership. How I arrived at the point that I wanted to buy a Kia Telluride is a completely different story.
And quite frankly, Google may show you the Telluride without your having searched for it, right? So there could have been a lot of things that influenced that. And you then may have been on your mind as well, but Google will take credit for that.
Google,
as well.
So the same thing happens with candidates. Recruiters live under this delusion that they know where candidates are. It's actually an inverse relationship. Recruiters will often go to a place. It's like they go to a rock, they lift up the rock and the candidate is there and they go, oh, candidates are coming out of this rock.
Right.
The problem is that they don't realize that the candidates are lining up behind the rock where they can't see them. The reason they're lining up behind that rock is because that's where the recruiter is.
Right.
The rock used to be Online Career Center and Monster and Hot Jobs and Computer Jobs and Career Builder and Indeed, and it's now LinkedIn. The thing is, the recruiters made LinkedIn.
Right.
People go to LinkedIn to get jobs because recruiters are on LinkedIn to get jobs.
That's it. And there
So
are
LinkedIn
people
is not the
who will
source.
never go to LinkedIn to publicize their availability, and those are typically the people that you have been going after.
That's exactly right. So you can't rely on the source. So when you look at applicant flow from the point of view of, was it the advertising? Is it the brand name? Can you remove the brand name? Can you blind the job and do a real? It becomes really, really murky. And nowadays, we have an even bigger problem, which is we have an overwhelming amount of robotic applications.
Right.
If you look at a typical job, there might be 2,000 applicants, but they're not even qualified. Now, if you ask me this question, if you said, how many people does it take to get a hire from advertising, I would start the number not at applicants, not at people that came into the application, but I would start with resume review.
Yeah.
People who passed resume review. If you started there, then I can count.
Right.
So if you reviewed 147 resumes, that's one thing.
Right.
But if you got 147 applicants but didn't look at them, that doesn't count.
That's a whole different
It's a whole different story.
Yep.
It's 147 past resume review people.
We have burned through so much time, but we're pushing this one to an hour. So you talk about just the hidden benefits of sourcing in your book. Marketing, gathering competitive intelligence,
Mhm.
etc. Sourcing right now is changing. There are uh, automated ways of achieving sometimes the same result. So if sourcing as we know it goes away, what's most important? How should we handle the hidden benefits of sourcing? How do we think about marketing? How do we think about gathering competitive intelligence that we gather naturally as we go about the job of sourcing?
So there are other values to having a sourcer in a sourcing team, like, for example, economies of scale and centralization. There's the same value in centralizing any other function, right? So centralization of a function is always has some pros and cons. And so the same thing with recruiting, the same thing with sourcing. And it's not always the best thing for everybody. Competitive intelligence is not something that can easily be automated,
Right.
but at maybe some point it can be. And it would be the same thing as saying that you could automate investigative journalism.
Right.
So a sourcer, in a way, is an investigative journalist, but our subject matter is talent. So it doesn't matter how much you automate the sourcing function, you still need to have that critical aspect of it, even with the automation. So I would argue that sourcing is not going away; it is changing. Hence, I think what you were going to ask me about the white paper. There really wasn't ever supposed to be a role for sourcer. That wasn't ever the point.
That
When
is
I
a
started,
development in the last 25 years. Yeah.
right. When I started doing it, there was no job for this
No.
30 years ago. It wasn't a job. It was part of my job. But I had to call it something. And I was calling it cyber sleuthing, which was the name of the newsletter. But that didn't really, there are so many other things called cyber sleuthing that it just didn't stand out. And so we eventually borrowed from procurement. And that's how we ended up in sourcing, because in procurement, you source raw materials, which is why a lot of times people look for sourcer jobs when they find supply chain jobs, because actually that's where I borrowed it from.
Right.
I borrowed sourcing for talent, like you source raw material for procurement. But unfortunately, it was supposed to be part of the job. It was always a specialization within recruiting. It wasn't necessarily designed to be a standalone. So saying that sourcing is evolved or isn't necessary anymore would be like saying recruiting isn't necessary anymore. It's part of the job. Recruiters are still going to have to find people. There's always going to be a need to find someone. And what's gotten much harder now is finding people in the noise.
Right. Right.
So it's not about finding the unfindable. It used to be. Now it's about finding someone in the giant mess that
is really what has captured my attention, and really what I'm hoping to focus on in the next couple of years. So I love your descriptions of the common types of hiring managers and the hiring managers with whom we have difficulty. And, we've all seen the, I've got a guy kind of manager, or the I'm too busy to work on this hiring manager. What are some of the things that TA leaders can implement to affect or curtail this kind of behavior?
Track them. Track the hiring managers.
Track
Nobody tracks them. Yep.
Track and report.
Even if you just track it, that's a good start. But yeah, reporting would be great if you hold them accountable for what they're telling you about. So if you have a recruiter, Steve, who works on similar requisitions, and Steve is working with Carmen, the hiring manager, and Shally, the hiring manager. Carmen and Shally are both hiring for a very similar role. Carmen runs an engineering department, but their focus is on the shopping cart of the mobile store. Shally runs an engineering department, but their focus on the search function of the shopping cart or whatever, right? And Steve has been able to successfully send candidates to Carmen to the tune of every 3 or 4 candidates that Steve sends to Carmen, one gets an interview. But with Shally, the same Steve has sent 20 candidates and not one of them has gotten an interview. That's not Steve's fault.
Right.
That's Shally. So you need to be able to hold your hiring managers accountable for doing their part of the job. If you know that your recruiters perform and they normally perform at a certain level and have a certain conversion rate, with most hiring managers, you have one hiring manager where that's not the case. It's not because the recruiter's not doing a good job. You need to look at, are the hiring managers actually providing feedback? Are they acting on the candidates? So we measure recruiters all day long, and we have all these metrics about, if you look at every metric anybody recommends about recruiting, it's always got to do with the recruiter doing the job.
That's it.
Nobody ever talks about the hiring manager's metrics. I want to see a metric that shows me how long it took the hiring manager to get back to me on my candidate. Where's that metric?
Right.
Show me that. So if you look at that, then you'll see which hiring managers truly are partners and which ones are not. It's too one-sided. We don't, as leaders, we're hammering at our recruiters, telling them how to, increase their time to fill by one day, and celebrating their time to fill got better by one day. But ultimately, if you ask a hiring manager whether they wanted a faster time to fill or a better candidate, they're always going to tell you they want a
better candidate.
We're just hammering these poor people in the wrong way. So hold hiring manager accountable to metrics that measure whether or not they're doing their job.
That's it.
Interviewing. Oh my God, Carmen, have you ever had a hiring manager that you have a scorecard of 1 to 5, where 5 is the best? They give everybody 5s all the time.
Right.
That's useless.
Or just the opposite, right?
Or they give everybody 3s all the time.
Right.
So if you have hiring managers that don't even scorecard well, they need to be put out of the process.
That's it. I later in my career as recruiting leader, I got to the point where I was able to sit down with managers and say to them, guess what? We're going to get 5 candidates to you at most. If that's not working out, if you haven't seen what you need in those 5 candidates, we need
give
to
me feedback
and
we'll send you 5 more, but you need to give me feedback.
Yeah, we have to have different conversations. And
that's it.
And that typically worked, right? It worked either because we were able to have those additional conversations or because hiring managers became better at scrutinizing their resumes. So from your white paper, you said, I think you wrote, new tools can process vast candidate data in minutes, ranking and filtering using algorithms. This frees recruiters for strategic engagement, but risks overlooking ideal matches due to embedded biases. I'd love for you to expound on that, because that's where we are.
That's where we are. And that's going to become an even bigger problem. And these biases, I don't even want to, Carmen, you and I have had over the last 30 years, many very highly spirited debates about diversity and what it means.
Yes.
And I'm not even going to go down the route of, Trump canceled diversity. That's not even where I'm going.
I don't believe that.
I don't either. And so I'm not going to go
exactly.
there. What I'm trying to tell you is that the bias isn't about race or gender necessarily. No. The bias is bias. And these biases, what a robot can do faster and better, a robot can also have faster and better biases.
Right.
So it's an amplification. And these hidden biases could just as well eliminate someone as include the wrong people. So it's not just necessarily leaving the wrong people out or or eliminating people unfairly. That's part of it, but it could also be showing the hiring manager all of the wrong candidates because of the bias. So you don't give them very much of a choice. These machines are going to do whatever they do faster, but you still need to have human oversight. And the bias that I'm talking about there, here's a perfect example. There's a candidate that I placed. I talk about this frequently because it's such a huge, huge example. When I was at Fiserv, that their job title didn't match the job description.
Right.
Their resume didn't match their job description. In fact, their skill set, if you looked at the job description and their resume side by side, they wouldn't even be kissing cousins. They
That's
were
it.
not even
Right.
distant relatives. They were
Right.
like completely two different species from different planets, you know? But we hired them. And here's why. When I was on the phone with that candidate about a different job,
Mm-hmm.
and they were telling me about their experience, what they actually were doing was exactly what this other job needed done. It just wasn't called that. So I told the candidate on the phone, hold on a second, let me show you this requisition. And I'm going to email it to you, and I want you to suspend your disbelief. Don't hem and haw when you get it. Just read it. And I know you're not going to think that it's for you, but read it. And so he gets it and he reads it and he goes, oh, I would never have clicked on this job, but I can see what you're saying. Yeah, there's some of this stuff I've done. Hold on. No, yeah, I've done all. Wait a minute. No, I've done all of this. Hang on. This is exactly what I did in my last job.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, all right. So then I said, let me send it to the hiring manager. And I did the same thing with the hiring manager. I said, look at this resume and suspend your disbelief. You're not going to believe that this person is qualified for this job, but they did exactly
That's
what
it.
you're looking for them to do. So just read the resume and agree to a quick call with them.
Yep.
Candidate got hired, and it was the best job that they'd had in their entire career because it was so well suited to what they were doing. But it was a
Tactical human.
complete
Yeah.
mismatch.
Yep.
And no algorithm in the world would have matched it because the keywords weren't even in the same planet.
Right. Right.
That's what we're missing.
I want to spend our last minute
I'll talk quickly.
talking. Okay, well, we'll do 2 more minutes. I want to hear a little bit about tools. In your white paper, you talk about there are just so many tools. There's a huge frustration around how do we select what works for our teams. What do you recommend? How should tool selection be organized? Is there someone who should have that responsibility? What kinds of tools should they use to actually evaluate? Um, and I'm helping a client right now who is in the midst of this, and they want to improve what they're doing, and every single vendor is knocking at their door. How should that be organized?
As far as the decision maker, I think like with a lot of other corporate decisions, you don't want to have death by committee. If you have too many people evaluating a technology, you're just not going to make any decisions. So there really does need to be an ultimate decision maker. And I think the ultimate decision maker should be as high a level a person as possible that's actually done the job.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for a little while, but they know what it's like to do the job. If they're so far removed that they've never done the job, then I'm not really sure that they're the ones that should be making the decision. They should be relying on someone else to make the decision that's done the job. But I'm going to go back to something that I learned when I was being trained to be deployed for the Peace Corps. And that is a concept called appropriate technology. The concept is to recommend the most advanced appropriate technology suitable for the environment,
Mm-hmm.
which means that if you're trying to stop people from deforesting the national reserve forest and providing them alternate ways of sustenance, you don't recommend that they bring in a $300,000 milking machine,
Right.
even though that is the best technology for
That
milking
exists.
cows.
Right.
You don't. Instead, you recommend something completely different that's appropriate. So I think that that's completely lost. We tend to go after the bright, shiny object, the new hot technology. And part of it, this is my very nefarious, devious part, I think sometimes leaders do this because it gives them cover.
Right.
Because they can switch from one tool to the next. And in between that transition period, they get away with, well, we're not doing so well because we're just onboarding this new technology, and it buys them some time. I know that's an awful thing to say, but I think it happens a lot more than we realize.
It's true. And there are, there's the desire to really leverage some of these tools.
Mhm.
And then there's a gap between really understanding what the tools
Right.
can do and if they are the right
Yep.
tools for that.
So going back to the
application.
appropriate technology, Carmen, what I would say is the first thing you have to do is understand the need. What is it that you really need? I'm actually helping a client right now determine whether or not they move from, don't laugh, Sugar CRM as their recruiting CRM
Mhm.
to HubSpot CRM as their recruiting. Neither one of those are recruiting CRMs.
Exactly.
The choice is, do they move or not whether they go somewhere. So it wasn't, can we buy another one? It's, do we stay with Sugar or not? And the option is to go to HubSpot. And believe it or not, I was the one that was advocating for staying with Sugar. The reason is that the things that they need to do are in that system, and they're also in the other one, but the other one comes with a whole bunch of new headaches,
Right.
new learnings,
That's it.
change, reworking, and so first thing you need to do is understand what is it that we really need? What is the problem that we're solving? And buy a solution that solves that problem. Unless the solution happens to overlap another department's problem, then you collaborate with them. But if it doesn't, there's no reason for you to buy I see a lot of companies out there going with Workday ATS because they already have Workday. Well,
Right.
that's not a really good reason to choose.
I've worked with those clients.
Well, we already have Workday, so we're just going to throw in the ATS. You know what that reminds me of? Lotus Notes.
Right. Oh gosh. Don't take me
People
back
still using Lotus Notes because basically the IBM was giving it away.
there. Right.
You can have it for free. Oh, well, if it's free, then just because it's included. So I think solve the problem that you have. What is the problem that you have? What is your
Deeply understanding the problem that you need to
What do you
solve.
look at? Do you have a volume problem? Do you have a contact problem? Do you have a conversion problem? And solve for that technology. And then don't overbuy because you don't need a $300,000 milking machine
Right.
to milk one cow.
Right. That's it. I'm going to stop us there. We've gone over the hour. My podcast producers will yell at me.
You can
but I
cut a
don't
lot of
care.
that out, I'm sure.
I don't care. I really appreciate your taking the time.
Of course.
Your other book is on the way, so give me some time to
You got to
get
do the
that,
second one now.
read
All
it.
right.
Maybe there's likely going to be a third season of the Recruiting Book Club.
It's a very
maybe not.
different book.
And so
Yes.
I'm excited to read it, excited to go deeply on it. I appreciate your really just sharing your knowledge as you always have. And
Yeah.
I hope that
Always a good time.
folks out there can listen and take heed of some of the lessons that you've learned. Yeah.
Somebody better. Otherwise, it would have been a waste, right?
I don't think a word of what you said ever gets wasted. So,
I hope so. I hope somebody uses it.
well,
Thanks, buddy.
thank you, Shally. Are you're doing well?
Doing okay. Yeah.
Good.
Doing okay. I'm past the hurdle. Just as a precautionary tale, make sure you always go see your dermatologist.
Always.
You just never know. I mean, Bob Marley,
Yep.
And there's some permanent damage. There's some permanent side effects that I'll have to live with the rest of my life. But the alternative is dying. So, I
Yeah.
might be angry that they didn't tell me what these were going to be,
Right.
but then would I have done anything differently? So now I just have to live with it. It changes the things that I'm able to do in
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right.
It's all right. Just a different path, but moving
So I have to
forward.
relearn something. I'm not going to be able to do as much walking and as much of other things I wanted to do because of it. But yeah. We'll adjust.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you out there on the circuit at some point.
Yeah, they did. They actually, Kevin Grossman asked me to come to ERE, whatever that's called, the new one.
Oh yeah, I think I might pop in for that.
I don't know if you're going to
Yeah.
go to that one. Yeah. And I'm probably going to go to SHRM Talent or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
The
I
SHRM
don't
that's for
think I'm gonna be at
recruiting.
SHRM, but there are
recruiting
a couple
SHRM.
of events I've already set up for this year. So yeah,
Cool.
very cool.
Well, let me know where you're going. I might meet you up. I'm going to try to go Recruiter Week or whatever it's called in Nashville.
Oh, in Nashville. Yeah, RecFest.
Wreckfest. Yeah. that
Yeah,
one.
I did that for the first time last year. That was interesting.
I'm going to try and go to that one in
Yeah.
SHRM. So that's
Yeah.
and ERA. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
But if there's one that's worth going, let me know.
I will. Absolutely. All right. So I'll
buddy.
get your next book. And I'll at
All
some
right.
point book you for another conversation.
Yay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.